I have a very special guest, a friend of the show, Dr. Nalaka Godahewa, the State Minister of Urban Development, Waste Disposal and Public Sanitation. Welcome back, sir. I think last year on this very day, we had another, program talking about the President's 1 year. So it's actually good that you're here, so we can make an assessment from that point to this point. On Tuesday, the opposition of this country, led by the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, had a protest. And the theme of the protest was, Me Saapaya Dang Athi. Care to comment on it?
No, I think it is always the opposition's right to voice their opinion, and they take different ways of doing that. That's the democratic right, we always respect that. The more they do, the better it is, because if they point out something wrong, we can correct it, but more often than not. The problem is they point out at things which are just politically helping them, not necessarily what help the country.
One of the criticisms they have, I saw Dr. Raj Sasenaratne making a statement in the media saying that the government is scared because of that. They got all the court orders from various courts to stop and quash this particular protest. Is the government afraid?
No, I don't think that's the reason. The reason is primarily the COVID situation in the country. We know we have suffered enough. For 2 years we suffered because of COVID situation, and now we have brought it under some control, and we can't let it get out of situation again. We have to keep it under control, and all these protests are risk because of that. The only reason government was trying to control that is because of that.
So y'all are not afraid? Y'all don't think that the tide is changing from the current government to the opposition because they are fed up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the opposition is doing their job. I mean, they were doing this from the day they came to the parliament, no? I don't think there's anything to worry about. The important thing is we have done some job during the last 2 years. How well we will continue is the issue. People will give their mandate after 5 years.
So let's talk about the President's tenure. 2 years gone down the line. Now he started with a lot of promises. Earlier on we showed our viewers 10 key promises he made, and we try to objectively assess based on that, and it actually gave us an idea about what really happened and what did not. Minister, what is your view? You were very close to the President during the campaign, and you're still very close to the President. You are a key advisor to him in terms of economic and other matters of the government. How can you objectively take a stance and understand and tell us your viewpoint of the last 2 years of the President?
Before I answer that, I would like to make a small correction. Yes, we were working very closely with the President. We were part of the think tank which brought the government, and we were very much involved in the formation of the manifesto. But once the government is formed, there's a cabinet with ministers taking different responsibilities, and it is the cabinet which works closely with the government as the executive part. We have been given different responsibilities, so we take care of those responsibilities. So when it comes to overall economic management, I think we must look at the government per se, not as individuals advising. Then coming to your question, I think we must always look at President's performance in relation to what was promised and what was expected. So let's go back to the latter, what was expected. I think people expected primarily 3 things from the President, or rather the presidential candidate in 2019. Yes, our manifesto had 10 different areas, but if you summarize, the people's expectation revolved around 3 things. The first one is national security. At that time, people were living in fear. The Easter Sunday disaster had taken place just 1 year before. Racial unrest was everywhere.
A few months before.
Few months before. Then racial unrest, religious unrest, all those things were there, a lot of problems, and people feared for their lives basically, and terrorism had returned after almost 10 years since the end of the war. So people wanted President to bring peace back to the country. ensure security. That's the first thing people wanted. Today, they may have forgotten, but the primary requirement, peace was the first requirement. Second one was, there was some kind of constitutional instability, or rather chaos in the country. Remember, after the 19th Amendment, people didn't know who was the leader of the country, whether it's the prime minister, whether it's the president. Both were taking decisions. Sometimes the decisions were against each other. Once the president even dissolved the parliament, and the prime minister has to remain in the parliament and fight back and get a court order. And it was absolute chaos. And there was so much uncertainty because of that. And another bigger problem was, at that time, because of this constitutional instability, the minority parties were controlling. They had become the decision makers. So all the decisions were taken to please them. So that was a serious problem that people resented. Then people wanted a solution for that. Third one was the economy. Today we talk of economic hardships, but many have forgotten we had the same situation in 2019 as well. Economy was going down. The economic growth rate had declined from almost 6.8% average from 2012 to 2014 to 2.1%, one of the lowest in the Asian region. The small and medium sector companies were getting wiped out. The banks are putting all the people on the crib, and so many problems. And unemployment was on the rise. So the economy was the third issue. So if you take the national security and the constitutional crisis and the economy, the first two already answered. I don't think we have a national security issue anymore. I don't think you live in fear anymore. The peace has returned. There's no social unrest anymore due to these racial issues or religious issues anymore. We are confident that our intelligences are working well, the security forces are in control, the country is safe. Secondly, that constitutional crisis is no longer there. The 19th Amendment was changed with the 20th Amendment, and we have brought in some kind of stability. Of course, there are views that this constitution has to be changed, a new constitution has to be introduced. So there's a study going on, there are people working on that, but overall, there's no issue in the country as at now, right? So the first two things he has delivered. The second one is economy. When it comes to economy, there are issues still. This is something that we all have to accept. I mean, there's no denial that, economy has changed, everything has been revived. Yes, there are issues. But what we must understand is from where we started. We started at a time the economy was in crisis. 2.1% growth rate, and it was on the decline. Had the same government continued, 2020 would have been negative perhaps at that rate. And the debts had gone up. The reserves had come down. Many issues. Unemployment is on the rise. So we took over the government in a situation like that, and we promised the people that we will change it. But then what happened? The global corona pandemic hit us just 1 month after President got elected. So for the last 2 years, we were struggling with that. So this is definitely not normal circumstances. If you take 2020, except China, every other country, including United States of America, had a negative growth rate. All the developed countries, all the countries that you know of, had negative growth rates. So Sri Lanka also had the same average, minus 3.5%, the world average. So we are now 2021, we have started recovering from that. But still, there are certain problems remaining that will be addressed with time.
I want to get, during the conversation, deep into those kinds of issues that the people are saying, but I want to get your reaction to something that is very famous during these days and on social media. The statement, Sir failed. So apparently, Sir has failed according to the opposition, according to his critics, and even the protest that was held by the opposition, they are claiming that the president has not delivered. What do you think about that? Has Sir failed?
No, I don't think he has failed. As I told you, of the three things that the people wanted, two he has delivered very well. These two they couldn't deliver for 5 years. They made a real mess out of it. So President has delivered in that. And when it comes to economy also, I think we are working on it. We have certain issues that needs to be addressed. The problems that we are facing today are not problems created by us. These are problems handed over to us. And we are gradually resolving them. And at the same time, if you look at what President promised in his manifesto, there were 10 areas, right? In all those areas, he has delivered. Take education, hasn't he delivered? Take rural infrastructure, hasn't he delivered? Take national security, hasn't he delivered? In technology, we are moving forward. If you take one by one, we can go into detail and discuss.
But then why isn't the common man on the ground is not feeling this? Because for them, what we see, I mean, I'm sure when you come out, when you travel, on Tuesday, there were lines at the petrol station. When you go into the market, prices are high. People are not feeling that, Minister. How exactly do you manage that challenge? Because you say these things are happening, but when people put their hand into the pocket, which is exactly what they want, there should be money. I understand very clearly that they have completely forgotten about the fact that we are in a COVID situation, and I also attribute to the President and the government and our health officials, the military, everyone, and I attribute to them the very fact is that they may manage to maintain what from 2015 what we lost, they brought it back, and then there's a maintenance. Now maintaining itself is really hard. That's happening in this country. So because of that, people have forgotten that we are going through a COVID situation, a global pandemic, and all those things. Now how do you address that? Because despite what you say, the common man does not have the ability to understand, except the fact that when he puts his hand into his pocket, if there's more money, he's happy. When there's not, he's not.
You are absolutely right. At the end of the day, what matters to the common man is his income, the cost of living, the normal problems. That we cannot deny that's the truth. And today he's having problems, as you very correctly said. On one side the prices have gone up, on the other hand there are shortages for various items that he want to purchase. That problem is there. Now since we are now talking to a more educated audience in this particular program, let's try to understand what's the issue. Because if you do understand the issue, then you will understand the solution. It's the responsibility of a government usually to control the cost of living, escalation of prices. Why is government struggling right now? Right, there's a problem. Yeah. That you and I both understand that. We must understand the big picture, how we arrived here, right? Now in any country, or rather let's take Sri Lanka, we have had successive governments since independence. And every government we have had the reason of inflation and the cost of living going up. When there's a surge of prices, what do governments normally do? Let's take in the past, what did government do? They use two things. One is taxation. Second one is control of imports and imports. This is what governments do to control price fluctuations, going down or going up. Let's say if the prices are going down because of excess production, let's say farmers have grown more paddy or some other agricultural product, and the production yield is greater, and there's excess supply in the market and the prices are coming down. In order to protect the farmers, the government usually increase taxes on imports and control imports, and thereby control the supply and demand, help the producer. The other way, if the supply is less than the demand, right, like what you are facing today, and the prices are going up, the government usually encourage imports. You bring import products, reduce the taxes on imports, and again create the balance, supply and demand. But today, can you do that? We are struggling with that. In order to bring products, import products, you need reserves, because the local importers do not have dollars in their hands, no, they have rupees. They have to convert their rupees to dollars. To do that, they have to go to the banks. The banks don't have dollars, bank has to go to the central bank. But what is the situation in the banks and the central bank? What is the situation with the reserves in the country? We are down to 2.8 billion reserves, which is sufficient only for a couple of months of imports. Then the question you have to ask is, why? How come we arrived here? Who is responsible for this situation? I'd like to take a minute and explain this. Right? If you go back to 2014, in 2014 we had foreign reserves of 8.3 billion in the kitty. Right? If you look at 2009-2014 period, continuously these reserves are going up. And according to the central bank projection at that time, they were projecting, central bank was projecting 145 billion economy by 2020. At that time it was 80 billion. They were projecting 145 billion economy by 2020 and $6,000+ per capita, and also foreign reserves about 14 to 15 billion. But in 2019, when we were when we got the government back, what was the situation of the foreign reserves? We had not reached 14 billion. In fact, it had gone down. We were at 7.2 billion. So that was the beginning of the problem. Then, how do we normally generate dollars in the country? It is through exports primarily, and exports in the country on average, if you take simply, it's about 10 billion. For the last 5-6 years, it had been the same number more or less. Our imports about 20 billion. So we always have a trade deficit of about 10 billion. How do we overcome this trade deficit? That is mainly through tourism income, which is roughly about 4.5 billion, plus foreign remittances, that's about 7 billion. And then there was always, if you take the last couple of years, about 1.5 billion foreign investment, direct investment coming every year. With all those things, we were managing this problem. But then what happened after 2019 with the corona pandemic? The exports and imports, more or less the gap was maintained. But the tourism completely disappeared. Foreign remittances got affected because more than 200,000 people returned to the country. And the foreign investments didn't come because nobody was investing anywhere. The world was going through a crisis. And we could have managed that situation if we had the reserves at the level that was originally predicted. If it was about 14 billion, 15 billion reserves, we would have managed. But we had only 7.2. And on top of that, we had to pay another 11 billion 2020 and 2021 settlement of debts. So that is why we are in this crisis. So this crisis was not created by this government. This crisis could have been avoided if the previous government had continued the economic growth pattern that was there until 2014.
Simply, if we say that to the public will always turn back and say, that's why we brought you.
Correct.
That's the reason we got rid of the good governance debacle and we brought you. So what's the solution?
No, I think the solution is something that many people don't want to hear. See, I told you most of the problems that we see today, this escalation of prices, shortage of goods, most of the items that are in shortage are imported. No, that's the problem, right? It's everything related to this dollar crisis. So I think we have to get out of this, and we need to see how we can get out of this. One can argue, of course, you have to increase exports, you have to bring tourists back. It is not going to happen overnight. It will take time. But there's something that we can do perhaps a little faster. That is to bring back the foreign investments, foreign direct investments. And that is where, rather than fighting and complaining and criticizing, I think everybody must get together and look at how we can bring some foreign direct investments, at least to get out this crisis. Because we have a crisis situation. So there I think we need some kind of a common understanding, particularly within the government, that we need to focus on foreign direct investment during the next 1 year. 2022, we have to bring some money in. Of course, we can go and borrow. That central bank is looking at. Central bank is looking at swaps. That also will help. But foreign direct investment is definitely one faster way.
There were foreign direct investments here in Sri Lanka. Projects were, even if you take the Gota power plant, if you take the Advani, the port, I think it was one of the areas in the port to be developed, and which is not constructed yet. And they came. We chased them away because our people started talking about selling and all that nonsense, whereas then we understand, like, today prices are going up, and that is directly connected to these protests and things like that, and not understanding the link. We chased them away. We did that same mistake with the Hambantota port, which was pretty much one of the biggest mistakes. That we had to renegotiate the whole deal, and it's also the same with the port city. Now, instead of having an upper hand with the renegotiated version, which the good governance did, we now have to pretty much be okay with what we have. So beyond that, what kind of solutions do you see? Because you're also an economist. You have been very, very instrumental in providing a lot of advice to this country, I think, since President Mahieash was there way back in 2013, 2014. So what do you think? Like, okay, foreign direct investment is even though investors come, they might think, okay, these guys don't want us to be here, so we'll take our money somewhere else. How can we, because there should be a mindset change of our people, which I don't know will ever happen or not, but if that is the case, how do we tackle that issue as well, understanding we have a very, it's like, you know, your mother-in-law, how much ever you try to do it, she might not understand it. Based on something like that, how do we change that and actually get out of this crisis? Because that is what's really important for us as a nation. How are we going to get out of it? We're talking about being like Singapore, Dubai and all that. I think we are way behind right now. So what do you think, in your personal opinion?
See, actually, all the solutions were discussed in the President's manifesto. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We mentioned in the manifesto what needs to be done. What we need to do now is to implement those things. Of course, we will not be able to do that in 1 year, but we have 3 years to go. I'm sure we will be able to do those things. So take, for example, the foreign remittances that we are getting. Most of these people who are working abroad and bringing money to the country are unskilled workers. They're getting, let's say, $500, $600, $700 at most per month. We mentioned at the time we were preparing the manifesto, let's move towards more skilled workforce. The example that President kept on quoting was nursing, because a nurse who goes abroad, a qualified nurse, can bring about, basically she can earn about $5,000, $6,000 as opposed to a housemaid who's earning $500. So we are working on that. The President has already started developing the nursing schools that are in the system, and the problem that they have is their program is only 3 years. In order to send a nurse to a European country, the program has to be extended to 4 years. So that work has already been done. I think from next year onwards, the 4-year degree program will start. And so the already existing nurses can go and get that 1 year additional training and then seek foreign employments. Caregivers who can earn about, let's say, 3 lakhs a month or 4 lakhs a month, $3,000, $4,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month. You need only a 1 year training program and NVQ4 level qualification, and now our skills development institutes are working on those things. So those things will happen, and that will make a significant difference. And even encouraging exports and all those things, everything was there. But the problem, you very correctly mentioned, the implementation. I think when it comes to implementation, even as a minister, I'm also struggling with the system, because system has so much bureaucracy and negativity and laziness. Breaking that barrier is very difficult. And also one of the biggest problem is because of 2015-2019 period, the way then government treated the public sector, taking various people to bribery commission, FCID and various
people are afraid.
things. People are afraid. People are scared to take decisions. And if senior management in the government are not taking decisions, politicians alone can run the country. So that is one problem we are struggling right now. We have to change that. We have to get people to work. So the policies are there, implementation is what is required.
There are lots of criticism, and you've been addressing them, and we've been talking about them. There's another criticism against the president right now, which is pretty much going on round and round in circles in the public space. It's about the organic farming decision, where the president has banned chemical fertilizer and is requesting the public to move towards organic fertilizer. Now, this decision is directly affecting that common man who's down on the ground, the grassroots level. What do you think? What is your response to that? The criticism is so loud. They say this was a wrong decision to take. This was not the decision to take right now, and they're talking about step by step, but then there is a lot of evidence which says you can't do it step by step. You've got to rip the band-aid. So what is your response to that? What do you think? Has the president done the correct thing here?
See, if you look at the fertilizer issue, this has a long history. No, this is not a recent one. If you take, for example, the previous president, 5 years, he was continuously talking about solving this problem. He wanted to reduce usage of chemical fertilizer.
And he actually spoke about something very crucial. He was more interested in the CKD, the chronic kidney disease, where he could directly attribute it to using of chemical fertilizer, and there was like lots of work he did on that area.
Exactly. So between 2005-2019 period, we spoke a lot about that. The only solution we finally introduced was building a hospital. Apart from that, nothing happened. So in our manifesto also, we mentioned that we need to reduce this, and of course at that time we gave a time period over a period of time. But then what President noticed was, after he came to power during the first year or reaching the second year, the chemical fertilizer usage was going up. It was not going down, it was going up. For example, if I remember, if my numbers are correct, I remember the agriculture minister telling in the parliament, 2018 the usage was 400,000 metric tons, which got double the following year, then got triple the year after. It came about 12,000 metric tons requirement. So that means people are using more and more. So I think it is at that time he took a firm decision, no, we will expedite this process. We will introduce some tough measures and try to control that. I think that decision was taken with good intention. He was not looking at politics. He was not looking at the future generation, the country's benefit, and he was willing to take a risk. And when you take that decision, then it is up to, again, to the officers and the ministers and other peoples to manage it and implement it properly. Being the first year, yes, there is chaos. I can see there are teething problems. But if we now overcome these things, we may suffer for a short while, but in the long run, we might get back to the right track. Of course, we must be flexible. We must make use of the learnings. We must correct the mistakes and finally decide what is the right way to move forward. Do what President wants, but at the same time, minimize any unnecessary damage.
Do you think the President is taking understanding and doing course corrections as per what he's learning right now? Or is he a stern person who says, no, this has to be done this way and that's it? Because that seems to be one of the actions he would take, and if we actually be realistic about it, if there is an election today, very much your party will lose because of this one key aspect of things. So how exactly do you think he learns from whatever the issues that are going through, or how does he deal with that?
See, if you take my personal experience with him, I think he listens, but you have to tell him, you have to argue with him, you have to justify. I have done it one or two occasions in my ministry on certain issues, and I may not mention the issues here. Nationally you saw results, right? Things related to not necessarily my ministry, but some national issues. When we went and discussed and took a firm position, he listens, he was flexible. So if anybody thinks that he's stubborn on something, I think the people who are handling that area in the government must take responsibility for not justifying the course and arguing with him and bringing him on the so-called right track. I'm sure if you talk to him and explain, he understands a lot of things, and he does understand a lot of things, and he has already changed a lot of decisions. And going forward, I don't think we must call him a stubborn person.
There is another one issue that I think it might become a bigger matter in the days to come, which you are directly involved, the Muthurajawala reservoir, the reserve, and what's happening with regard to the land in the area. Recently, I think the Cardinal went and filed an FR petition requesting the courts to take a firm decision on this. What is the truth there? What exactly happened, and what is happening right now?
Muthurajawala is a real misunderstanding that His Eminence and many other people are having at the moment, because we are trying to help them. We are trying to actually deliver what they wanted from us, and they have misunderstood that what our good intentions. Let me go and explain how it happened. Almost a year ago, His Eminence, the Cardinal himself, had a press conference and challenged the government, saying there is certain private party is in the process of acquiring land in Muthurajawala, and they are going to build a golf course, put up hotels, helicopter stand, all those things, and they wanted us to stop that. So then President wanted three ministries to get involved and look into that. What are the three ministries? Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Urban Development, and Ministry of Wildlife, because all these have some role to play. This whole area is anyway gazetted as a urban development area, entire Gampa district. When we went into details, we appointed the three secretaries of the ministries to chair a committee, look into that. They studied this case and came back and said, Muthurajawala wetland, which was about 7,000 hectares about 3 decades ago, has now been reduced to about 1,000 plus hectares, right? And it is getting diminished with time. So we have to preserve that, because particularly to prevent a further impact on floods, which is becoming a big problem for Gampa district, we have to at least safeguard what is remaining in the wetlands. And in order to safeguard the wetlands and to preserve them as they are, we have to take them under the government control. And there were all three ministries could have done that. Wildlife could have done that, Environment could have done that, Urban Development could have done that, but the other two ministries had a problem. The problem was, if you declare them under their acts, right, they do not have the money to acquire land if there's a need. Because let's say that particular private company who was going on acquiring private land there, if you want to acquire those lands back to the government and stop that, those two institutes will not be able to do that, because they don't get budgets for that. That is done the mandate. They will put some regulations, controls, that's it. So all three ministries got together, the officers proposed, let's declare this whole remaining wetlands under urban development, preserve that, and then hand it over to wildlife as a wildlife sanctuary. So that was the idea. So President's proclamation, the gazette that was issued in October, was for this purpose. The area that was identified in that gazette are only the wetlands plus the lagoon, right? And there are no areas where people are living. But when you publish that gazette, in the gazette, you have to give the Google coordinates for the lagoon and the wetlands, and when you get the Google coordinates, you have to mention the adjacent villages. Otherwise, you can't explain the border. No? Let's say if you want to explain the lagoon is adjacent to the Purana Grama Seva division, you have to mention that. So in the gazette, there are 52 Grama Seva divisions mentioned, and the people misunderstood that. People thought we are going to go and acquire those villages, and even the church misunderstood that, people misunderstood that, our own politicians misunderstood that. That is the whole misunderstanding. All we are proposing is to protect the wetland and the lagoon. If we do so, that's the only way we can save it for the future generation.
Minister, now we spoke about a lot of criticism, we spoke about a lot of issues that is there in the country, and you gave a very understandable, educated, not BS, you gave factual responses, which then a normal person, an educated person could understand. Okay, it makes sense. The government is not bullshitting people. So why isn't that happening from the government per se? Why is there a communication error? Why is the government failing? Because this was the same with the 2015 the good governance. They couldn't tell what they were doing. Why are you all also falling into the same trap of not being able to tell the people this is what we are doing, correctly informing them what you just said right now? It would have been just a conversation which would have ironed out a lot of things. Now, why is not that happening? Because are you all hoping that you all will go out of power three years down the line, or is that the plan? What exactly is the thinking behind the government, the president, everyone?
No, I think I admit we have the same problem the previous government had. There's a huge communication issue. I mean, you know that I came to Parliament only 1.5 years ago, first time to the Parliament, and coming into the political system, I see these communication gaps everywhere. It is the system. Whatever the party, very little discussion when you take a decision to communicate to everybody, get everybody's views, at least even if you don't take everybody's views, educate them to go and talk to the public. So this system has to change, and we have been voicing this opinion, and we have been talking to our leaders. Let's change that. Unless we change that, This communication issue will always be there. We are doing a lot of good things, but they are misunderstood by the people.
Exactly. You'll understand the lack of explanation from the side of the government leaves room for the lie to take precedent, because that is what's happening on social media. Even today, when I was coming in the vehicle, the person who was driving, he told me that there's a new passport which is issued for the port city, which I knew it was a flat out lie, but then this is happening. So why isn't the government taking more steps to address that?
I think most of these concerns that you are mentioning right now are coming from social media. Social media is not something that you can control. It creates stories, creates gossips. And unfortunately, in our education system, people are not trained to look at something analytically. They just accept whatever they hear. I mean, that is our education system. We were taught to cram and pass exams. No, in other countries it is not like that. You go for you study a subject, you study both aspects, all aspects, and then come to a conclusion. In our system, it is not so. So this problem is there in the society, and some people are misusing that. They are feeding wrong information intentionally, knowing that people are gullible and they will bite.
Even the energy minister. Press conference on Tuesday, he said that apparently one person created the fuel disruption where, by just putting some lies on social media. So I think you all really need to focus on that communication gap. Let's take a short commercial break. I'm in conversation with Dr. Nalaka Godahewa, the State Minister of Urban Development. This is a special presentation of Get Real. We'll be right back. Welcome back everyone to the special presentation of Get Real. We are talking about 2 years of President Gota at the helm of this country. I'm in conversation with Dr. Nalaka Godahewa, the State Minister of Urban Development. Doctor, what does the future look like? Because there's 3 more years to go for the president, and I think almost close to 4 years for you guys as the government, the parliament elections. Before the parliament election comes, what is the focus now? COVID kind of dented all your plans. 2019, you all came up with a lot of prospects and hope, thinking that we are going to really revitalize the country. COVID kind of put an end to that. So how exactly are you revitalizing? Let's talk about the next 3 years of the president.
So I think in any journey, what the most important thing is, if you should know the destination that you want to arrive at, and you must have a strategy to go there. And if you keep changing the strategy, you might end up somewhere else. That is what happened with the previous government, right? If you look at 2015-2019 period, I mean, we have discussed this many a times, 10 different policy documents. 15 economic policies. I have explained 10 different economic policies put forward by that government. Yeah. So then you don't know where you're going, right? As it was mentioned, the Alice in Wonderland, no? If you don't know where you want to go, you can take any path. Yeah. So they took several different paths. But I think in this government, we do not deviate from the manifesto. The only situation that we had to face different was the COVID situation. That was an unexpected situation. So strategically, tactically, we had to find solutions and address that situation. I think President did that quite successfully. I mean, that we all have to admit today, we are one of the best vaccinated nations.
Yeah.
And going forward now, 3 more years to go, we had to continue what we have started, then implement the manifesto as we expected, right? In that light, most of the things that he promised or rather wanted are doing. Let's take infrastructure development. We strongly believe to develop this country, the road infrastructure is very important because we must connect every city, every village, not only the major cities. So throughout the country, the highways, the road, even internal roads are being done, and a lot of money has been spent. Even this year, 250 billion allocation for road and infrastructure development, and that is what people ask. I mean, when you go to the villages and ask what people want, the first thing they ask is do a road. So this is something that people want. That has been done. Highway projects which was told during the last government have started. I think all highways, like the Central Highway, Ratnapura Highway, or Dambul Highway, all those will be completed before 2024. That's one area. The second one is we strongly believe for our future, education matters a lot. So the whole education system has to be reformed and improved, and a lot of investment has to go in. And if you look at the last 2 years, in this area, a lot of work has been done. Take university entrance itself. University entrance within 1 year was increased by 30%. In a single year, 10,000 additional students were taken in. 2 new universities have been opened already within the first 2 years. 10 city universities are under plans, and that will be constructed during the next 2 to 3 years' time. So the infrastructure is developed, and the schools, we had only 379 national schools in this country, and this year alone we are going to do 1,000 more. Right, so we are pumping our money, but it can't be only infrastructure. The education, the whole education system has to change. The curriculums have to change, and for all those things, there are plans that have been implemented. Then digitalization, which you spoke about, using technology for everything, the government and the private sector everywhere. I think we made a lot of significant improvement during the COVID period. I mean, people naturally started using technology. Working from home and Zoom meetings and all those things. And now the government sector has to follow suit. And this year, budget has given 4 billion for digitalization process itself. So the government focus is very much there. Renewable energy. The president said they want by 2030, 70% of our energy generation must be renewable. We're very much moving in that direction. Already solar energy, wind energy, hydro energy, lot of projects are under construction. So we are very much moving in that direction. I think 2,000 megawatts from renewable energy will be introduced to the grid within the next 2 to 3 years' time. So.
Constitution is another promise that you all made, the new constitution. Where is the government currently at?
Constitution, as I mentioned at the very beginning, is not a crisis at the moment, but it's a good thing if you can come up with a better system. Right? So there's a study going on. There's a committee working on, and they're working very closely with the I think Justice Ministry, I understand. Very soon it has to come out now and start. They must start the discussion with the political authority. If I find something slow in that process, is that it has not come to the political circles yet. I expect it to happen soon. But the political dialogue is so much important in that all parties must discuss what these proposals are, and finally we can bring it to the parliament and debate and decide what we want to do.